I have been the parish priest of St. Joseph's at Ellingham for 36 years, and I have stood at perhaps 400 weddings in that time. The wedding of Miss Anne Carrington to Mr. Tom Walsh, on a bright May Saturday 2 years ago, was the most beautiful one I shall officiate at, and I do not say so because of the bride or the groom, or the long bright marquee on the south lawn, or the band of cousins who came up from the coast to play at the dancing. I say so because of what happened during the cocktail hour on the great Bechstein grand in the corner of the marquee, when the bride's older brother Edmund, 3 glasses of champagne past his decency, pointed across the lawn at his sister's chauffeur, made a public wager, and the chauffeur, a young woman of 26 in a plain black driver's jacket and a chauffeur's cap she had not bothered to remove, walked up the marquee steps in her flat-soled black shoes and played the whole of the second Hungarian Rhapsody of Liszt in 11 minutes and 38 seconds, and broke her brother's pride exactly the way Anne had told me, in confession that February she had been hoping someone, anyone, would break it for him before the wedding day. I am Father Brendan Hughes. I am 73. The chauffeur was Miss Mary Doyle. She was 26. She had been hired by the bride's parents for the wedding day on the recommendation of a local car hire firm in the town. She had driven Anne to the church that morning. She was to drive Anne and Tom to the station that evening for the honeymoon train. In between, she had been sitting on a folding chair beside her black Mercedes on the gravel turnaround, reading a paperback novel, waiting. The bride's older brother Edmund Carrington was 29. He had been the heaviest cross his parents bore since he was 17, asked to leave 2 good schools and 1 good university, and he had spent the 4 months leading up to Anne's wedding making it plain that he disapproved of Tom Walsh on the grounds that Tom was a country veterinary surgeon, and not quite the caliber, you understand, father. Anne had cried about him in confession that February. She had asked me whether it was wrong of her to wish that someone would put Edmund, just once in his life, in his place. I had told her that wishing was not a sin, and that the world had a way of putting people in their places without our help if we were patient. The wedding was, until the cocktail hour, the kind of wedding the Carrington family knew how to put on. The service was at noon, the marquee opened from 1, the Bechstein grand in the corner tuned that morning. By 1:30 Edmund was on the marquee steps with 2 of his old friends, on his 4th glass of champagne, holding court in the loud, easy way young men of his sort hold court at their sisters' weddings. His mother had asked him twice to lower his voice. He had laughed. Edmund Carrington came down the marquee steps with his 2 old friends. He came down loudly. He stopped on the gravel. He looked at Mary Doyle. He pointed at her. He said in a voice that carried across the lawn and into the marquee and silenced in the way of these things 3 separate conversations near the door, "There she is, the chauffeur. Tom's family is so dressed up they couldn't afford to drive themselves. They hired her." One of his old friends laughed, the other did not. Mary Doyle on the gravel did not move. She did not, in fact, change her expression at all. She was wearing her uniform jacket and her cap, her hands, which had been folded across her arms, lowered slowly to her sides. Edmund, who had been drinking too long to read a room, and who was now playing to the marquee door for the benefit of the silence he had created, took a step toward her. He said, "Tell us, Miss Driver, what do you do for a living when you are not driving Tom's family from one paddock to the next? Are you a small farm girl too? Are you all just country, every last one of you?" Mary Doyle said quietly and audibly, "Mr. Carrington, I am working today. I should be glad if you would let me continue to work in peace." Edmund laughed. He turned to the marquee door, which had filled with the faces of perhaps 30 guests. He spread his hands, listened to her, continue to work in peace. "The little chauffeur wishes to be left alone. Tell me, Miss Driver, can you do anything at all besides drive a car?" There was in that moment the small silence that comes in a marquee at a wedding when a quiet thing has gone too far. The bride had not yet come down from her room. The groom had not yet arrived. The mother of the bride was somewhere in the back kitchen with the caterers. The father of the bride was, I learned later, on the lawn taking a photograph of the marquee that he very much wished, in retrospect, he had not taken. There was nobody in those 3 seconds who had the authority to silence Edmund. Mary Doyle silenced him. She looked at him for a count of about 2. Then she said, in the same quiet voice she had used a moment before, "Mr. Carrington, I can do 1 or 2 things besides drive a car. Should you like me to demonstrate one?" He laughed. He thought she was joking. He spread his hands wider for the marquee. He said, "By all means, demonstrate. We are an audience. Demonstrate any small thing your country school taught you. Sing, recite a poem, dance a jig. I shall make a wager." He turned to his friends. "I shall make a wager with the chauffeur. I shall propose. Listen now." He turned back to Mary. "Miss Driver, there is a piano in the marquee, there is a Bechstein grand. We have been listening to it stand silent for an hour. I propose that you play. I propose that you play the second Hungarian Rhapsody of France Liszt in full in the next 12 minutes. Those are the recorded minutes the great pianists take, and if you can play it well or badly beginning to end without breaking down, I shall do two things." His face took on the small, ugly smile of a man who is enjoying himself for the wrong reasons. "First, I shall apologize to you publicly here on this gravel in front of all of these guests. Second, and this is the part you will care about, Miss Driver, since you are a working girl and you understand the value of money, I shall write you a personal check on the spot for £10,000, cash if you prefer, from my own account. I shall not even need to ask my father. 12 minutes, the Liszt, the second Hungarian, we are listening." The marquis was silent. Mary Doyle adjusted her cap. She straightened the front of her jacket. She said very simply, "I shall not take your money, Mr. Carrington. I shall accept the apology only. Will you allow me to walk across the lawn and into the marquee without further commentary?" He laughed. "Be my guest, take a long walk, play the Liszt, we are timing." He pulled out a small, expensive watch and held it up to his friends. "From the moment you sit at the bench, 12 minutes, the whole rhapsody. If you stop, the wager is forfeit. If you simplify, the wager is forfeit. We shall be the judges, my friends, and off you go, Miss Driver." Mary Doyle walked across the gravel. She walked across the lawn. She came up the marquee steps. She did not look at me as she passed. She did not look at any of the guests. She walked the length of the marquee floor to the Bechstein grand in the corner. She set her cap on top of the piano. She took off her uniform jacket, folded once neatly and laid on the bench beside her, and sat down at the keyboard in the plain white shirt she had been wearing under the jacket. She set her hands above the keys. She paused for exactly one breath. Then she began the second Hungarian Rhapsody of France Liszt. The second Hungarian Rhapsody is one of the most famous pieces in the piano literature. The opening is a slow, dignified lament. The closing, the frisca, is a brilliant gypsy dance at a tempo that any pianist worth his name has had nightmares about. Between the two halves there is a long, expressive middle section that asks the player to find in the right hand a singing voice and in the left a steady, almost ornamental walking pulse. To play the whole rhapsody in 12 minutes is, in the recordings, a normal tempo. To play it in 11 minutes and 38 seconds, which is what Mary Doyle did on the Bechstein in the marquee at the south lawn of the Carringtons' house on the May Saturday of Anne's wedding, is at the brisk end of the recorded range, but it is musical, not rushed. I was sitting against the side of the marquee with my lemonade. I did not, in the first 3 bars, understand what I was hearing. I had been to the second Hungarian once in my life, in Dublin, in 1972, at a recital by a famous old pianist whose name I shall not mention because the family has asked me not to mention any famous names. I had not, in 54 years, heard the slow opening played the way Mary Doyle played it that afternoon, with the dignity of a woman who has carried a private gift for a long time, and is not, in this moment, going to ask anyone's permission to set it down. She played the slow opening. The marquee, which had filled now with the 30 guests who had been at the door, did not breathe. The cousins from the coast had laid their fiddles silently on their chairs. The mother of the bride had come out of the back kitchen and was standing with her hand on the back of the bride's grandmother's chair. Edmund Carrington and his 2 friends had walked slowly up the marquee steps and were standing inside the door, perhaps 15 feet from the bench. Edmund still had his watch in his hand. He had not, I noticed, looked at it. Mary moved through the expressive middle section. She played the long ornamental phrases the way a Hungarian grandmother sings the old country songs over a kitchen table, without fuss, without showing off, with a small private rocking pulse that I have rarely heard outside Eastern Europe. The Bechstein, which had been a beautiful object in the corner for an hour and a half, answered her like a horse that has been waiting all morning to be ridden. By the 7th minute the marquee was packed. Every guest had heard, by some quiet word, that something was happening, and they had come in. The frisca began. The frisca is the fast dance at the end. It begins as a small fast wink and accelerates through several variations until it explodes at the end in a brilliant rush of octaves that is, in the recordings, the moment all the pianists earn their applause. Mary Doyle took the frisca. She took it not at the showman's tempo but at the dancer's tempo, which is faster than the showman's tempo but cleaner. The marquee, which was not built for ovations, came as close to one as a marquee can come. Several guests were standing on their chairs. The cousins from the coast were standing with their fiddles forgotten in their hands. She brought the rhapsody to its final cadence. She lifted her hands an inch above the keyboard. She let the last chord settle. She set her hands in her lap. She looked calmly at the small, expensive watch in Edmund Carrington's hand. She said in a voice the Marquis could hear, 11 minutes 38, Mr. Carrington, by my count. Will you check yours, please? He looked at the watch, he looked at her, he looked at the Marquis. His face had gone the color of the Marquis linen. He said in a small voice that was not the voice he had used on the gravel, 11 minutes 38, Miss Doyle. She said, Mr. Carrington, the apology, please, as we agreed in front of the guests. He set the watch on the corner of the Bechstein. He turned to the Marquis. He said in a voice he had to push out of himself, Miss Doyle, I have spoken to you this afternoon in a manner that no man of any decency should speak to any woman, and which I should be ashamed to have spoken in front of my sister on her wedding day. I am very sorry. I apologize, ma'am. I apologize to you. I apologize to my sister, who is somewhere in this house and who has not yet, thank God, come down. I apologize to Tom Walsh, whom I have insulted publicly all month for being a man I am not fit to clean the boots of. I apologize to my parents. I shall be leaving the wedding with their permission before the speeches, because I do not think I am fit company today for any of you. Mary Doyle inclined her head. She said, Mr. Carrington, the wedding is your sister's. Do not leave it unless she wishes you to leave it. Speak with her. That is for you to settle, not me. She stood up from the bench. She picked up her uniform jacket folded over her arm. She picked up her cap. She put the cap back on her head. She walked down the marquee floor, past the silent guests, down the steps and back across the gravel to her Mercedes. She sat down on the folding chair beside the car. She picked up her paperback novel. She continued to read. I followed her after a moment. I sat down on the gravel beside her chair because I am too old to stand for long. I said, Miss Doyle, you did not tell us you played. She said, Father, I have not played for an audience in 3 years. I lost my place at the conservatory when my mother became ill. I have been driving cars for 5 years to keep her and my younger sister at home. I do not, in the ordinary course of my life, sit down at the pianos in the corners of strangers' marquees. I said, why this afternoon, Miss Doyle? She set her book down. She said, Father, I had been listening to Mr. Carrington for an hour from the gravel. I had been listening to him speak about his sister's groom and about his sister and about Mrs. Faherty's family and about all of us. I'm not at the wedding for the bride. I am at it for the fee, but the bride is not, I think, a woman who deserves the brother she has. I do not, in the ordinary course of my life, take it upon myself to correct other people's brothers. This afternoon I made an exception. The bride came down from her room 10 minutes later. Edmund had not yet left. He spoke with his sister in the side room off the marquee for perhaps 3 minutes. I do not know what he said to her. I do know that Anne came out of the side room with her eyes wet but her face lifted, and that she walked across the marquee and the lawn to the gravel where Mary Doyle was sitting with her paperback, and that she took Mary's hand in both of hers and thanked her. I was 3 steps away. I heard her say, Miss Doyle, I have wanted for 15 years for someone to do for my brother what you have done for him in 11 minutes 38 seconds. Will you stay for the dancing? Mary Doyle thought about it for a moment. She said, Mrs. Walsh, if I may call you that, I am on duty. I shall stay for the dancing if your father permits me to stay in uniform and accept a cup of tea instead of champagne. I shall not stop being the chauffeur today. Anne laughed through her tears. She said, you shall stay in uniform. We shall give you the best cup of tea in the house. Father Hughes, you shall keep her company at the small table by the door. I did. I kept Mary Doyle company at the small table by the door for the rest of the afternoon, with a teapot between us, and we talked very quietly about her mother's illness and her younger sister's schoolwork and the conservatory she had left, and the conservatory she hoped, when her mother's circumstances allowed it, to return to. The Carringtons paid her that evening the full fee they had agreed for the day's driving. The mother of the bride pressed into Mary's hand, at the kitchen door, a small check from her own personal account that I am told covered the 2nd year of conservatory fees and a small sum besides for her mother's care. Mary tried to refuse it. Mrs. Carrington would not let her. The check was, I learned later from the mother of the bride, signed in her own hand, not her husband's. She had been planning for some time to do anything that did not pass through her son. Anne and Tom were married 38 months ago. Edmund Carrington went away to a residential program for 6 months after the wedding, and has not, so far as I am aware, raised his voice at any working person since. He came to confession last autumn for the first time in 12 years. I gave him no penance, because the man who came out of the box was not the man who had walked into it. Mary Doyle is at the conservatory now. She gave her first public recital last March at a small hall on the north side. I drove up for it in my old car. She played, among other things, the second Hungarian Rhapsody, more slowly than she had played it in the marquee, with the long middle section taken at the tempo of a settled woman rather than a young woman defending a stranger from her own brother. I think on the long quiet evenings now about that May Saturday, about the chauffeur's cap on top of the Bechstein, the small folded jacket on the bench, and the silence in which Edmund Carrington, 29 years old, looked at the watch in his hand and understood for the first time in his life that the world had been waiting very patiently to put him in his place. The world is patient until the right young woman in a chauffeur's cap walks across the gravel. Then the world is the second Hungarian Rhapsody, played in 11 minutes 38 seconds, in a marquee on a May lawn, for the soul of a brother who had not, until that hour, understood he had a soul to lose.